Hello, everyone, and welcome to SlasherU, a college football podcast from Slasher Sports. I'm your host, Christian Rao, here with my co-host, Steve Feck, and welcome to Monday after arguably, in my mind, Steve, this was the best day of college football in a very long time. Definitely this year, we saw the game of the year, maybe times 2 or 3 between FBS and FCS. I know we're going to get to that as well, but this was one of the best weekends of college football that I can remember in at least the last 30 years for me.
Wow. I mean, that's a statement. Yeah. I mean, there were some great games. I don't want to diminish what was going on there, but yeah, what was great. It was every conference had a surprise or had a story. And I think that's what makes covering college sports, but especially college football, that much more special and unique in that you have a pretty good idea what's going to happen on an NFL Sunday or, any given night in the NHL or NBA. But when it comes to college football and college basketball, which we'll talk about, on our other podcast at some point, you really can't just sit back and say, okay, yeah, we know what's going to happen, because you really don't.
Absolutely. No, that's true. And we didn't know what we were going to expect when we were talking about it on Saturday morning. If we were going to have some upsets, we obviously did. We had some that came down to the last second of the games, knuckleball field goals to gutsy calls on a 2-point conversion. This was just a fantastic weekend of football all across the leagues. Like I said, FBS through FCS. This is the first time since 2007, both number ones, which was North Dakota State and Alabama, lost the football game. Pretty interesting stat on that one. We got a lot to talk about, lot to cover here on Monday mornings here. We're going to try and find some things to complain about, but honestly, I think it might be a little tough because there was a lot of really good football across the spectrum in college football. Let's get started. But first, before we do that, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and follow us wherever you're listening or watching. If you're on the YouTube pages, don't forget to hit that bell, as we let all SlasherU content daily between college football, college basketball, and the future other college sports will be on the feed as well. Right now, those are the only two, but we're not done. We're just getting started with this page. As you can see, we're only just a few weeks old, and we've already seen so much engagement and interaction. So thank you so much. That is all thanks to you, the listener. Steve, let's dig in here. Let's talk about the third Saturday in October. Let's recap it. Let's talk about Alabama and Tennessee. To me, this is what really started off me talking about saying this is one of the best football weekends that I've seen in a very long time. This game was everything I hoped it would be, and then some. It came down to the very end of the game where we had an Alabama missed field goal that they could have won the football game. If you look back a week before, Alabama's kicking team was struggling. And then Hendon Hooker, a guy who we keep saying is underrated and is not getting the mentions he deserves for being a Heisman finalist, gets the job done, gets the Tennessee Volunteers in field goal range in a crazy knuckleball field goal to win the game. I mean, this game was so electric that I'm pretty sure somewhere in downtown Knoxville, the field goal posts are still being walked around. Like they're still trying to figure out where those are. Last time I checked, I saw a picture, a graphic that they were in downtown. Like they are still carrying the field goal posts. This is no joke. They are not in the stadium anymore. But regardless, this game was absolutely electric. Hendon Hooker goes for 385, 5 touchdowns, and when I mean 5 touchdowns, all of them went to Jay Hyatt, the wide receiver out of Tennessee. There's also talks that maybe we like some of these UTSA and some of these other big name wide receivers, but Hyatt really just solidified himself in some of those awards after what a game he had. 52-49, a final between two of the best teams in college football. Your thoughts before we dig into this even deeper?
I purposely didn't go dig into the stats. Monday mornings, I really think it has to be gut reactions. And yes, it's important. And we have shows all week where we can go into more deeply about the different things. But the thing I thought of, and I wasn't watching the game live because I was so entrenched in watching the FCS games that I was literally relying on you for updates and just checking in every once in a while. You have to wonder how that Tennessee kicker felt, because he knew when he struck the ball, he didn't strike it good. And I want to go back and look, was it the hold? Was it him just, shanking it? I don't know. When a field goal goes like that, there's something done between the hold and the kicker striking the ball. But I wonder how he felt when he was watching it wobble up there. Yeah. And then as it's wobbling up there, what are the people in the stands? All the Tennessee fans, what are they thinking? They're like, oh my God, no, this is our chance. This is a once in a generation win for Tennessee. It's not that they haven't been worthy before, but they just never seem to be able to get it done. So for that fan base to win, not only in that dramatic fashion, it could have been a complete blowout, or it could have been a 1-point game. Or they could have won on a safety, whatever it was. It really didn't matter because it was that experience, and there were so many times in that game where you had to think after the play was finalized on both sides, but certainly for Tennessee, I can't believe I broke that run, or I can't believe, that, I didn't get I thought I had that pass just so, there was so many scenarios in a game like that for a team like Tennessee. That's what really I took away from that game. Yes, there's all the hype and it was a great game, and now the SEC is in complete chaos.
Chaos is a great word for what the SEC is in. And speaking of that kicker, what a wild way to end this one. This is the same kicker that in the middle of the game, he missed an extra point. So Tennessee had to go for 2 to make it back to normal 7-point standards, because, you can't slip away against Alabama. But whatever score you have, you got to know that that's probably not good enough until the clock strikes 0 when you're going against Nick Saban.
Right. And when you watch that tape, he knew right away he missed it. It isn't like it's like, oh, the wind's blowing it. No, he knew he missed it.
If that kicker is not on scholarship, he needs to be. And if he doesn't have any NIL deals, he needs to have a boatload by the time he comes back to his campus in his dorm room. And I'm sure already by now, if he doesn't have 100 missed calls from a whole bunch of Tennessee stores, because that guy is probably never going to pay for a meal or a beer in the surrounding area of the University of Tennessee for the rest of his life for breaking the streak against Alabama.
Very, very true. And then on Alabama's end, okay, now they're like, all right, now we don't control our destiny now. Now we have to win plus hope other things happen. So, the SEC now becomes must-watch football every weekend. Everybody always talks about it. So to say that, people might be saying, what are you talking about? SEC, everybody loves. But do you really love watching SEC football? Most times I would say no. Because quite often the games haven't been competitive over the last 3-5 years. Now, every team literally can't afford to have a bad week. They can't afford to have a key injury. They have to get it done. Otherwise, they're out of the conversation. And then the SEC West, how many teams are in the conversation now? 4, maybe 5?
Absolutely.
Realistically 4, but 5, and I'm sure you could look at other scenarios where it could even be 6. So, wow. All you can say is wow. And congratulations, Volunteer fans. You've been waiting a long time for a win like this. You've had some great players on your rosters. It just never seemed the cards just weren't there. This happened. Congratulations. Enjoy this, because it might be another generation before you get a win like this.
Well, hopefully it's not another generation until they get another win against Alabama, maybe in that fashion. But I think that we just renewed this rivalry, and what we've known from the past in the late 90s and before. This is a great rivalry to have. On the other side of the football, as you spoke with Alabama, they don't control their own destiny, but it seems like they have a healthy Heisman Trophy winner in Bryce Young again. He looked great. I didn't really see any time where he was taking it easy, where he didn't show that he wasn't 100%. I was actually quite impressed with Bryce Young right from the get-go. He was making some scrambled throws on the run where he really had to let that shoulder rip, and he looked good. And he threw for over 450 yards in the game. So by no means was it his fault, or was it the fact that he wasn't 100% that they lost that football game. I think that, honestly, I think Tennessee just by the end of the game outplayed them, but not by much, just enough. I mean, this game was that close. Now there were some issues and turnovers on each side of the football, so you can't really say that mistakes were the game changer. But I will say that during the Saturday show, I said that there were some times that Tennessee capitalized on special teams, like against LSU in the past. They found a way to do that against Alabama. The turnover margin, Alabama's had struggle. I think that might have been the reason that Tennessee could stay in that football game as well in this one. Alabama lost the game, but I don't look at Alabama as a team that is completely done. Their season's over. Now they're still going to be in the running for a college football playoff. This is one of those teams that if you get one loss, they're not out of it, because they still can run the rest of the table. Just as I thought that they could be undefeated at the end of the year, I can see them easily being 11-1. They have a tough schedule coming up. Don't get me wrong. They play Mississippi State, who's looking for a rebound, LSU, who's still trying to find their identity, and Ole Miss, who's still undefeated. So there is still, by the way, Ole Miss is ranked below Alabama as an undefeated team in the SEC. So if that still stays that way, it's wild. We'll talk about the top 25 here soon, but I'm happy to see that Tennessee got this win. I think it's great for college football that this rivalry is finally renewed. I think that it was absolutely electric, that stadium, and I'm just really excited at how this one ended. With that being said, we had 3 games on Saturday, Steve, where all the teams were undefeated. We went into Saturday with 15 undefeated teams. We knew we were going to leave with less than that because some were playing each other, but we left with a lot less. We left with 9. We're going to dig into some of them. One of the unbeatens versus unbeatens were in the Big Ten, and that was Penn State versus Michigan. Right off the bat. Yeah, that's a really good way to see it, because right off the bat, I will say this. At the very beginning, this is my true, I tweeted it out too. This was like my true initial reaction. Penn State was bending at first, but not breaking the first couple of drives. They'd let them drive down. As soon as they hit the red zone, they turned up the volume. They didn't let them score. They only held them to 2 field goals. At halftime, Michigan was only up by 2, and they were winning the first down battle 18-1. And if it wasn't for this brilliant read by Sean Clifford on an option read, where, I mean, he fooled out everyone in the big house, not only the camera, he just fooled everybody. Like it was amazing. It was one of the best read plays that I've seen in a very long time, that went for 64 yards. If it wasn't for that, they would have had 20 something yards, total yards, in the first half. Michigan's defense absolutely just did their job, and it shows on the scoreboard. And then on the other hand, we knew Michigan's running game was amazing, but we didn't know it was this good. Now you see Blake Corum, who's in the Heisman race, and you put him up against some of the other Heisman finalists in the past through 7 weeks, like Derrick Henry, for example. He's crushing those numbers. Blake Corum is a legit Heisman finalist right now. He has a legit contendership. We just talked about Hendon Hooker, who has a shot. CJ Stroud from Ohio State, obviously, I think probably is the front runner still. But Blake Corum is right there. I think if any non-quarterback player in the entire college football spectrum, he is the top guy. What's your thoughts on this? I know you're not too wild about this game because it really showed Penn State's colors. Unfortunately, Michigan really ran away with this one.
Yeah, I tried to dissuade / trick you into not talking about this game, because as much as people seem to think I enjoy it, I don't like saying I told you so. And I'm talking to you, Penn State fans. I'm not talking about college football fans in general. And I live in Pennsylvania, and even though technically the University of Pittsburgh campus is less than 2 miles from my house, it's a Penn State. Penn State dominates the football market, in Pennsylvania, even in Western Pennsylvania. But it's paper lions. The old George Plimpton book. I mean, they were paper lions. I mean, I knew this was going to happen. Did it surprise me they kind of hung in there for the first half? No, not really. But Michigan is just a better team. And not just on paper. On the field, Michigan's a better team. And they're an entirely different team since McCarthy's taken over the job and has performed so well. Penn State, I said it Saturday and I'll say it again today here on Monday mornings. Penn State now has to sit back and wait and see what SEC or Big 12 or ACC team is going to thump them in a bowl game now. Because it's the same thing every year. Penn State's good. Then they play either Ohio State or Michigan. They get their tails kicked. Then they kind of run the table, sort of, so they get a pretty big bowl invite. And then they go to a bowl game and they get embarrassed. So it's Groundhog Day. Just we'll call it Nittany Lion Day rather than Groundhog Day.
Well, starring Bill Murray, or because that's what would be really the thing I'd be curious about in that case. Regardless, you're right. Because last year we saw them have a great start. They get to their 6th game of the year, they lose, and then they finish 7-6. Is this where we see Penn State go from now a 5-1 team to a 7-6 team? I sure hope not. I sure hope they find a way to at least salvage their season. I mean, they're still only at 1 loss. They still got to face some tough teams, though. 9-3 might be their ceiling.
Oh, I think 8-4 is how it's going to end up. What a game like this does, and I'm surprised more Big Ten coaches and teams don't rally around it. They know eventually Penn State's going to have that kind of game. So there's going to be film about how to exploit it. Now, everybody doesn't have Blake Corum, I understand, but he didn't get 408 yards. Okay. As a team, they ran for 418 yards.
It was a lot. It was in the 400s. Yeah. I know that.
Yeah. I was either 408 or 418. It 418. Doesn't matter.
418. Yeah, 418. It's shining right in front of me.
Yeah. I mean,
that's a lot of yards.
Yeah. I mean, FCS or Division II teams don't give that up to an FBS team. I mean, that is just an embarrassing performance, especially coming from a team that traditionally everybody talks about what a tough, rugged defense. They bend but don't break. I mean, it wasn't even a matter of breaking. It was just a matter of just lifting the gate and then letting the floodwaters come out. I mean, it was just a bad performance. But I wonder now, will a team that you would not think would stand a chance against Penn State, are they now going to have the film and have a little bit more confidence saying, hey, you know what? Okay, we're not Michigan, but we can do that. We can exploit this. We can beat them. So it's interesting, but boy, Michigan, whatever doubts that were there, and I have to admit, on the early previews and podcasts, I had said I'm not really sold on Michigan. You got to show me. Man, they have shown everybody that Michigan, Ohio State, it will be a huge disappointment and letdown if both teams aren't undefeated going into that game. And I don't really see a scenario where both teams won't be undefeated going into that game.
I'm with you. In 2 weeks, Penn State faces Ohio State, but in between that time, they got to face Ibrahim and Minnesota, which is another tough running task. And if it's anything like this week, they're in trouble. They might be showing up to host Ohio State with 2 losses under the belt, 2 in a row. And speaking of Michigan, you're right. We both said the upset could happen, which obviously that was far from the truth. Maybe for the first couple of minutes, we might have saw some hope, but
no, I don't think I said the upset would. I can't imagine, given my pathological hate of Penn State, that I would ever have let that. Well, I'll have to go back and check the tape. And if I did say that,
it might have just been just me, because I know I did say the upset could happen. I know it took Michigan, but I know I said that there was possible. But we saw with Michigan that we saw some strides of goodness against Maryland. They were down. They actually had the battle back. They became a true tested football team after their cakewalk of a start. That was nice to see. Then they go into Iowa and really take care of a defense. They take care of a defense that we thought they were going to have trouble with. And being a top 5 killer, we really thought that would be an issue. They take care of Indiana last week after starting rough in the first half. I think there's some, personal reasons that happened. And then we have these thoughts, at least in my mind, that, hey, maybe Penn State is over the hump. We give all this love to Penn State. I keep saying we because I know you didn't. I gave all this love to Penn State, thinking they could beat Michigan. The narrative was kind of built up. But Michigan was tried and true. They really proved that they could do what they need to do so far this season, and they really showed up against Penn State. And that proved to me why I do believe that Michigan will be undefeated when they take on Ohio State. I think it'll be both undefeated, but for this sake of the conversation, since we're talking about the Wolverines, Michigan will not have a loss against Michigan State next week, Rutgers, Nebraska, and even Illinois, even though I think Illinois is a really good football team. That's really what I want to swing it to real quick and talk about the Fighting Illini, because they did just beat the Golden Gophers in Minnesota. And Illinois has been one of those teams this year, Steve, that kind of came out of nowhere. With Brett Bielema coming in, they had this weird loss against Indiana at the beginning of the year. And if it wasn't for that, they have been really perfect. They beat Wyoming, beat Virginia, beat Wisconsin, beat Iowa, and then beat Illinois. I mean, looking at the Big Ten West, right now, to me, it comes down to Illinois and Purdue, which we're not going to see until November, that football game. But there's a good chance. Right now, they're 16th in the nation. There's a good chance that we go into that football game, both those teams being ranked.
Oh, no, I agree. I mean, I think Purdue is starting to figure it out. I mean, they had some stumbling early, but they've started to figure it out. Illinois, again, it's a puzzling loss, to Indiana. It was Indiana they lost to, correct?
Yeah, it was by a field goal. It was a tough loss. That's really what it was.
I mean, and they did everything right. I mean, they ran the ball. I mean, they have a terrific rushing attack. They made throws when they had to. And that's, if you look at all of the Illinois games, that's what happens. Now, I've only seen one game in its entirety. So I've been generally going back to the game in 60 type of deals. But you watch that, so you don't see everything that's happening. But, Illinois just makes the play or makes the stop when they have to, 9 times out of 10. So that everybody, I think, was sleeping on Illinois. I don't even remember having watched as much Big Ten Network as I have this year. I don't think even people on the Big Ten Network were talking Illinois up that much, other than their running attack. That would be it's a great game anyway. Illinois Purdue. It's a traditional. It's not the rivalry for Purdue, but it's always an important game for both of those fan bases. And now everything is going to be on the line, because I guess we have to, unless everything falls apart, we have to kind of say, okay, Minnesota is out of the running now. Good football team. They still may be the best team, in the West Division of the Big Ten, but I think they're out of the conversation now. So I think it's fun. I think it's good for the Big Ten to have a game like that and not have to everybody sitting around waiting for Ohio State, Michigan. Because basically, I think on the whole, the Big Ten's had kind of a down year, except for those two behemoths in Ohio State and Michigan. To have a race and a battle with good football teams, not top 5 football teams, but good football teams, I think it's good for the Big Ten. And hopefully that actually translates for bowl success for the Big Ten.
Yeah, I can see. And right now, obviously, Illinois has the advantage being up by a game. They're 6-1, Purdue's 5-2. They both have the same record in the Big Ten, but I could totally see that game, 3 weeks before the end of the season, right before we get Illinois, Michigan. I can see the Purdue Illinois game being the set match that says, okay, who goes to the Big Ten championship to face either Ohio State or Michigan. I can see that right off the bat. I really do think that is going to happen. That might be the earliest we find out who goes to a championship game. I think that'll probably be set in stone after that win. I think Minnesota is, unless we do see one of these other teams just completely fall off the wagon. Can't see that happening between Purdue and Illinois. They both have really shown some good balance. And looking at their schedule until towards the end of the season, I just can't see it.
Yeah. Do you have the Purdue schedule pulled up?
Yeah.
By chance? Yeah. Who do they have left? Because I want to say they've been through, other than Illinois, the toughest part of their schedule, correct?
Yeah. So their biggest loss was to Penn State, and then obviously they lost to Syracuse. Those are their 2 losses, but they did have a Big Ten loss to Penn State at the beginning of the year. They play Wisconsin this week, which we're still, the jury's still out in Wisconsin with Jim Leonard. Then Iowa, in Purdue, then the Illinois game, then they finish off Northwestern and Indiana. So they have a good finish, easy finish, but that might not matter if they can't get through Illinois. So Wisconsin and Iowa, those aren't 2 easy tasks, but extremely doable for Purdue. This should be a game on November 12th, 3 weeks from, we're talking right now, where we see a 7-2 Purdue versus an 8-1 Illinois. The winner heads to the Big Ten championship. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, ordinarily you would think, well, okay, maybe the last couple of years too, Purdue would try to be too pass heavy, but they've been pretty balanced offense this year. So I think that will kind of play into their favor. It's going to be a low scoring game because Iowa's not going to score probably, but
right.
But Iowa's defense is going to keep any offense for the most part pretty much, into a tight game. But I think with that new balanced attack that Purdue had to adopt just based on the talent they had on their roster this year, that actually might bode better for them when they take on Iowa. But yeah, that would be great. That game
between Purdue and Iowa will be a great test, a great eye test for us to see if Purdue can actually handle Illinois, because Illinois' defense has actually been better than Iowa's this year. So if they can handle Iowa's defense quite well, they might have a good chance against Illinois and Brett Bielema. We'll see what happens.
Very good point.
All right. Big Ten out of the way. We talked about the SEC real quick. Let's talk about, we just have to bring it up. The Sun Belt turns into the Stun Belt, Steve. Just have to say it real fast. We don't have to really dig into it. But as I said, we came into this week with 15 unbeaten teams. We left with 9. Coastal Carolina went down to ODU. All right. ODU moves to 3-3 on the year after beating good old Coastal Carolina. Gives them their first loss of the season. And then how about Georgia Southern beating James Madison? James Madison getting their first loss of the year. Finally make it into the top 25 their first year in, and they get their way out. Coastal didn't even get into the top 25, which that's a whole nother story for another day. But I think the coolest part about this story, Georgia Southern comes into Norfolk this week to take on ODU. So both the battle-tested teams that beat the unbeatens get to come in and face off each other this week. I'm going to be going to that game. I'm really excited about it. So I had to just throw that out there because I'm really excited for it. I couldn't believe that ODU came down with the win. I wasn't confident at all, but I watched the game. I had it up on the TV. It was the muted game up top while I was watching Michigan and Penn State. And it was fun. It was an air raid. I hope we get some of that on Saturday as well, because the game I went to so far this year against Arkansas State wasn't as much as a air raid. ODU still got the job done, but it wasn't as good. ODU is 2-0 in the Sun Belt, might I mention.
Nice. The Georgia Southern win didn't surprise me, and that's not a knock on James Madison. I mean, I think they've proven they earned that top 25. They probably had to wait a week longer than they really should have, because I think at the time, the week before last, I think they were already a top 25 team. But Georgia Southern, they're so well coached, and they're so disciplined, and they come up with a game plan and they stick it and they really just put it down your throat. We're saying, okay, look, this is how we think we can beat you, and you're not going to make us get off our game plan. We're going to just go at it and go at it and go at it. And, so that win didn't surprise me as much. How good is Georgia Southern going to be next year?
Yeah. Clay Helton's doing a hell of a job in Georgia Southern. I give them definitely a huge shout out. I'm excited, really excited for that football game. I'm hoping for an air raid. I'm hoping for a high scoring football game. Entertain me. That's what I'm excited for. Speaking of knocking out a team like JMU out of the top 25, let's swing over and talk about the brand new top 25 that dropped for this week. And with that being said, let's start off with the top 5. Not much has changed around. Obviously, Alabama takes a drop back, but they really just swapped with Tennessee. Georgia at number 1, Ohio State number 2, Tennessee gets at number 3, and then rounding out the top 5, Michigan and Clemson. Tennessee received 15 first place votes, Ohio State 17, and Georgia at 31. Real fast, out of those 3 teams, who would have you put at number 1?
I probably would have put Ohio State number 1.
Even coming off the bye week, even them not playing this week?
Yeah. I mean, I think it allowed, sometimes bye weeks can work in your favor because other blemishes are now not being exposed. So Georgia, you know, I mean, they're still undefeated, but they didn't have a great game. I mean, they won pretty decisively, but I wouldn't say they had a great game. So then you can have some smart aleck, you know, bitter old writer like me, for example, that would look at that and say, well, you know, Georgia didn't do this, or they didn't really, you know, protect the ball the way they should have. And I would have put Ohio State there. I think Ohio State, top to bottom, they're the best team in the country right now until somebody knocks them off. And the only team that's going to knock them off is potentially Michigan.
Potentially, right.
Yeah, you know, but that's down the road. Tennessee, I think you reward Tennessee, putting them at 3. I might have actually put Michigan, and I've been the one saying you can't have 2 top 10 teams in the top 5 because you're not going to have, you know, 2 Big Ten teams, you know, in the championship. But those ratings start coming out in 2 weeks. They came out. So I mean, I would have maybe rewarded Michigan because that was a statement win against Penn State. That really was. And then Clemson, you know, they're getting the job done. So okay. I mean, part of me would have maybe put TCU or Ole Miss there, but that's kind of nitpicking things. I do think that Alabama should be lower than Ole Miss, and I think they should be below TCU. As good of a football team that they lost a game, and you want to have those undefeated teams should be near the top until somebody knocks them off. It's just, maybe it's the baseball guy in me that we're ultimately, it's the best record. It doesn't matter, you know, what's expected or, you know, the talent that's on the roster or whatever. So maybe that's my baseball bias when I'm looking at this. But I mean, basically, Ole Miss is undefeated in the same conference, same division as Alabama. They should be ahead of Alabama in the rankings. That does not make Alabama a bad football team. It rewards Ole Miss for having a great season. And I think the same thing. I mean, TCU, wow, you know, boy, did they really impress me. You know, I had to go back and watch the game after the fact because I was watching so much FCS football. But again, they're undefeated in probably the best football conference in the country right now. So therefore, TCU should be ahead of a 1-loss Alabama team.
Yeah, I like that. I think that they should be at the best 7 because I think Ole Miss should jump them because they are in the same conference and unbeaten. I'd like to give UCLA and TCU the jump, but I can understand it in this case because of the type of loss that Alabama gave up. It was really, you know, a field goal. That was it. Doesn't show they were a bad team whatsoever. We got two new teams in the rankings. UNC finds their way to 22nd, and Tulane gets into the top 25, sitting right at the end at 25. Our beloved Kansas Jayhawks fall from 19th out of the rankings. Then, of course, JMU falls out after being 25th last week after their loss to Georgia Southern. Your thoughts about Tulane hopping in there? We know that we were very impressed by them so far this year. Cincinnati is also in there still, 21st. So we got 2 teams in the top 25 from the American Conference.
Well, first of all, I think Tulane's a better football team than Cincinnati, so they should be above them. And quite honestly, I was jotting things down, I had Tulane 20th. I mean, I don't care that they weren't in the rankings last week. Tulane has proven that they know how to win football games, and they're no longer catching people by surprise, and they're still winning football games and pretty decisively. Not big scores, but when you watch a Tulane game, there's no doubt that Tulane is going to find a way to win that football game. At least that's been my limited experience with them over the last couple of weeks. I'm a little surprised that Syracuse was ranked below Wake Forest, and I love Wake Forest. I do, but again,
it's that conference thing, right? It's kind of the same situation as Old Miss.
Exactly, you know. And then, quite honestly, I had Kansas State higher, I had Illinois higher, I had Illinois ahead of Penn State. Actually, I had dropped Penn State actually to 21st when I was doing my tweaking around. Though you could argue, is Kentucky ranked too high? Is Texas ranked too high? I don't know. I can see UNC being in the top 20 and having one of those teams drop down in the last 5.
Tulane gets to go off against Memphis this week after Memphis losing a heartbreaker in 4 overtimes to East Carolina. It was a shootout, just like I said it would be. As for UNC, they came off a pretty fun win against Duke late Saturday night. They had to host on Pitt, which is one of those teams that has really disappointed so far. 4-2 record, but they have been usually still finding a way to receive a vote or two in the top 25. And then we'll see them obviously face NC State at the end of the year. And then in the middle of that, we'll see them face Wake Forest. UNC has no easy track for the rest of the year. So I feel if they could find a way to stay in the rankings, that's a win. But at 6-1, congratulations, Mac Brown. You made a bowl game. That's something that we might have not have heard lately with UNC. So it's really happy to see. I'm still confused about Cincinnati. I know we've talked about that. They took care of South Florida by only 4. And this is a South Florida team that we have not been impressed about for a very long time with Jeff Scott. Right. So yeah, they really had to work to get this one. South Florida was winning at halftime. They were up 17-14 at halftime. Cincinnati gets 14. They're outscored South Florida 14-7 in the second half to win the game by 4. We'll see what happens with them against SMU. I'm not high on SMU, but in 2 weeks, we'll see what they do against UCF. I think that to me is the game changer. If they can beat UCF and in good fashion, not a 4-point South Florida win, then okay, you've earned my trust being a top 25. But I don't know why they're even there, let alone 21st right now. I would have put a team like Purdue in their spot.
Right. I mean, and is Mississippi State, should they be at 24? That really surprised me. Did they play that bad of a game? I mean, I know it was disappointing. You and I were both pretty high on Mississippi State, going into the game on Saturday, but you're telling me that Cincinnati's better than Mississippi State? Okay, I'll debate you on Tulane, and I'll grant you, okay, you think they're better than Tulane. All right. You need to see Tulane do something a little bit more. Okay. All right. I mean, I'll give you that, but you can't tell me that Cincinnati's better than North Carolina. They're definitively not better than Mississippi State. So I don't get it. Stop being lazy. Stop voting on last year's performance.
That's what it feels like. It really does feel like that's what's going on with Cincinnati. And I really can't say that with any of the other teams really in the mix. I do feel Mississippi State will probably fall out of the rankings next week because they do face Alabama. And I don't see Nick Saban losing 2 in a row. So, but I'm excited for Tulane just as much as I was excited for JMU last week and excited for Illinois last week. So it's nice to see Tulane in the rankings. It's nice to see Mac Brown's Tar Heels hop up in there. I'd like to see Purdue make it next week. That's what I'm going to be paying attention to. And then I wouldn't mind, depending on how many teams, drop out of the rankings, maybe a UCF pop up there. So when Cincinnati and UCF go at it, it's another ranked battle and it can be some more fun to talk about. So people maybe will pay more attention. And therefore, when Cincinnati loses the UCF, they'll really put them out of the rankings the way that you and I have really just not been impressed with Cincinnati so far.
Yeah, but should either of those teams be ranked?
I think UCF has right now, no. But I think UCF has a better argument than Cincinnati in my mind right now. I just do. I don't know. And I think that next week will prove that. I'm already giving you, look at that. I'm already giving a prediction. UCF's can beat Cincinnati in 2 weeks. But we'll see. That's our top 25. We do have a great game coming up. We have plenty of good games coming up this weekend again. College Game Day's heading UCLA against Oregon. It'll be number 9 versus number 10, and then a battle of unbeatens in the ACC all the way through week 8, and we're getting 2 unbeaten ACC teams. Love it. Syracuse versus Clemson. It's happening, Steve. We got everything, everything lined up. Look at us. I saw hype promos about the Syracuse Orange football team in middle of October. I mean, you can't say that it's happened since the late 80s. And there wasn't social media then, so there wasn't promos unless waiting for the newspaper to come out. So, yeah, this is fantastic. I'm super excited. I'm bummed that it's not in the Carrier Dome. I don't even think that's what they call it anymore. But I'm bummed that it's not there and it's in Clemson, because Clemson has such a good home record. They haven't lost in so many games. But then again, it'd be so cool to see an upset, and that's what we love to talk about on the show. All right, with that being said, let's wrap this one up and let's talk real quick about the late game out west, the Pac-12 After Dark, because this one, again, I was so excited this weekend about how great the Tennessee-Alabama game was. I was so hyped up that I had to take a walk. I was like, I got to take a walk. I got to cool down. I was having a great time. I was pumped up. I don't have any horse in the race between any of those teams, but just as a sports fan and the lover of the sport, it was amazing to see that happen. Take a walk, come back just in time for kickoff USC, Utah. And this game was great right off the bat. You said, and I quote, you thought that USC was going to show up for the beginning of the game, then Utah was going to smack the brakes out of them. Well, Utah winds up winning the game, but not in that fashion, Steve.
True.
It was a smash mouth back and forth game, one score scoring right after the other. I remember the commentator talking and saying once USC scored their 35th point, they said, I don't think 35 is going to be enough in this one. And that was the perfect definition for this football game. As soon as you scored, if you looked at the clock and you saw there's enough time for a team to get down the field, you knew that you weren't safe. And that's how it felt the entire football game till the very end. And I think that's exactly why Utah made a gutsy call after they scoring their last touchdown. Instead of kicking the extra point to tie it up at 42, they went for 2. And Rising had an option play, snuck it in, and takes the lead 43-42. What a gutsy call. And it was enough to win the football game. Utah really takes away USC's chances for being a college football playoff team. UCLA, you're the Pac-12's only hope now in my mind. What's your thought of this game? I thought that was such a gutsy call. I swear, once they scored by 2, I was just like, I was going to pull my hair out. I was just so excited. It was amazing.
It's why Whittingham is, if not the best, well, he's probably the second best coach.
I didn't know he was a coach. I knew he was there for a long time, but they said he's already been there for 18 years. That is so underrated of how long he's been there. You hear about other coaches like Saban, and then you hear about Brian Kelly, how many years he's been in the league. I know not the same team, but I just couldn't believe that he's been with Utah for 18 years.
Well, and when he got there, I mean, they've always been a pretty decent program, but I mean, they weren't a signature program by any means. And at any stage, I would say from year 4 on right up to the current time, he could just write his check. He could say, give me a blank check. I'll fill in the numbers and I'll be your head coach. But he doesn't want to leave there. He loves the university. He loves the fans. He loves living there. Again, a great college football story. You don't see it in professional sports. And you don't even necessarily see it in the SEC or the ACC or the Big Ten. I mean, there's always that draw with those big name, conferences. I know they're in a Power 5 conference, but really they're 5th of the Power 5 conferences. For him to be there that long is a testament to the kind of man he is, not just the kind of terrific football coach that he is. But I would expect nothing less from him than to go for. I don't think he even, maybe for dramatic purposes or for maybe he wanted somebody to get a breather, he might have waited. I think he knew right away we're going for 2.
You saw Rising out on the field, and he looked over, and it didn't seem for a second that he was about to walk off the field for extra point. You could already tell that was probably already stated. Hey, if we score here, don't run off. We're going for it. There wasn't any type of wonder or second thought. They knew the play. They snapped it. They felt confident, and it showed. I said we were about to head out. You almost let me head out.
No! I was already authoring smart ass comments to me.
You almost let me run away without talking about the FCS. I told you I was so excited about this week. that with all these games that I just completely went off script and just started bouncing back and forth in our different topics. We meant to talk about this a lot earlier, but it's a great way to end it as well. It's going to be a new look in the top 25, not only in the FBS, but in the FCS as well. And we're going to dig into this FCS recap here right off the bat, Steve. Hey, you hit it. You were right. South Dakota State took care of business. Take me through that game real quick. Wow, what a game.
You know, in the early going, North Dakota State, they were in control. I mean, the noise in the Fargo Dome, and again, okay, it's not as big as some of the other domes you think of. That's because there's not that many people that can fill the Fargo Dome, but that place is loud. It was as loud as any small college basketball gym that you can imagine. You know, when their team is rallying for an upset, it was unbelievable. There were four penalties at the line of scrimmage for South Dakota State in the first quarter. They literally, and three of them were by the same guy. He literally couldn't hear what was going on, and he just was so amped up. He just kept moving. The second half, talk about first half being one team's game in the Bisons. Second half, it was all Jackrabbits. There, you know, North Dakota State can look and say, oh, you know, we could have had that late touchdown late in the first half, and we threw that interception in the end zone. I would have put this up 28-7. You could go through all of these scenarios in your head. Bottom line is, you have me saying San Diego State.
See, it's hard. When I saw SDS or SDST, I initially thought SDSU. So yes, my fault.
Yeah, well, no, I mean that was my fault because I put the wrong initials up there. But they were determined. No. We're not going to get blown out of here. And if we lose, we're not going to limp out of here with our cottontails, between our legs. We're Jackrabbits. Go Jacks. They got it done. And there was absolutely no question now who the number one team is in FCS. And it's ironic because South Dakota State has not gotten first place votes for the most part in any of the polls. Yet they've stayed in second. Some polls had them at third, but it was always North Dakota State and Montana.
Yeah, and like you said, there is no doubt in our mind who's going to be number one in this one because the other team receiving votes was Montana. And my heart was hurt when I saw that they lost to Idaho. I was so big on Montana all year. If you've heard us talk about FCS throughout the season so far, I was shocked why Montana did not have the first place votes after being undefeated. Idaho goes ahead and gets their first win in 7-8 tries against Montana. First time in a very long time, Steve. They finally go down. This is really going to change and shake up the top of the FCS standings.
Oh, absolutely. And again, just on the same thinking that I have with the FBS, usually, especially in the early going with the FCS, we were alluding to writers being lazy. You're not in major media markets for the most part with FCS schools. So they will, unless a big story jumps out at them, they're going to keep things slotted. It's almost like the draft. Okay, this is your signing bonus if you get drafted in this slot. That's what I think a lot of the writers do. And I would say, and this is not a knock against them, those writers are focused on their conferences. So really, even if a team in the Missouri Valley or the Big Sky, which are the two powerhouse conferences, at least for this season, and probably you could say the last two seasons as well, they're not going to knock their guys up top, even if there is a loss. But I think based on the decisive wins that occurred for teams that were lower in the standings and the fact that Montana got beat by Idaho, another game, second half, the Vandals just took control of the game, and they just shoved it down the Grizzlies' throat. And that was at Montana. That was in Missoula. So that was a big win for Idaho. I will say that there are several undefeated teams now remaining. Sacramento State, big win. They looked really, really good this week. They've looked really good all season long, but they were truly a statement game for them. They already knew what the outcome was for North Dakota State in the Montana games by the time their game was over. And there's going to be a team from Montana, I think probably in the 3 slot, but I think it's Montana State. Montana State remains undefeated. And then you have Weber State, who I really hadn't paid much attention to, but again, because of the conference they're in, I mean, you have to say, well, they've got to be a good. They're undefeated, so they're going to have to be slotted above North Dakota State and Montana. And a team, even though they were on a bye, the team that I think a lot of people in college football were sleeping on is Holy Cross. They had a bye week, so again, you can't say, well, they didn't perform up to standard or whatever it is. And okay, their conference is not as strong as the Missouri Valley or is as strong as the Big Sky. Doesn't matter. Holy Cross is undefeated. They need to be in the top 5. And if I had the vote, that's how I would put it. South Dakota State, Sacramento State, Montana State, Weber State, Holy Cross. And then on down, you have North Dakota State, Montana. I begrudgingly said, okay, Jackson State. I'm sorry. They're in the top 10 because Deion Sanders is their coach. That's the only reason they're in the top 10. But for the FCS, I think that works. I think it's good to have excitement around, especially at a traditionally Black college, to have them in a national championship conversation. So, I say okay with that. But, I think William and Mary is going to be in the conversation, I think, at the end of the year, as far as playing, in the playoff to see who ultimately wins the title. But FCS, I've been very honest on this podcast about the fact that I'm getting back into college football. It was kind of off of my radar, but this podcast is so much fun, and getting to know people in the various fan bases, it's just been terrific. Watching exclusively FCS football all weekend, as far as the live games, I am hooked. I am in love again. I don't care how much money you stole from me, college football. Okay. I don't care all the bad things that happened. They're erased from my memory. Now, I am in love with college football again, and it's feeling pretty good.
Well, welcome back, because I feel the same way. And it's only going to get even better with college sports as we dig in more and more week by week. And then we're bringing on college basketball as well, which I know you didn't have any thought in your mind about your lost love there, but just getting back into the groove of college sports after being away from it for so long is fantastic. And this has been a very fun project to do with you. And I'm looking forward to doing this for a very long time, and giving you guys all the content that you guys deserve here on SlasherU. That's going to wrap it up here for our Monday Moanings. Thank you so much. Really wasn't a moaning show, though. It was just a really good, we had to just recap how great of a weekend it was for college football with the FBS, FCS. It was just a really good weekend. We found our gripes somewhere, though. Don't worry. If you're a Penn State fan, you probably thought this was the worst podcast ever. So,
but yeah, I'm gonna get all sorts of hate emails and texts again once people see this. And we did complain about the top 25,
right? And
because there are some glaring, dare I say, just dopey decisions made, in the 25. So I think we kind of aired those gripes too. So it wasn't all sweetness and donuts and everything. I mean, we basically got a little nastiness in there, but that's a testament to how great a weekend that it was. I mean, you had to work hard, and usually for me, it's just being National Grouch Day on Saturday. It's not that hard for me, to criticize or, say, well, what about this? And blah, 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 get off my football field kind of deal. But this weekend, really, it was hard to come up with even criticizing Penn State. Thankfully, they made the job easier for us. But, it was really hard to have to focus on that, because it was such a wonderful weekend. And there are so many stories that we haven't told yet, but we will.
Yeah, plenty more to talk about just this week alone about what's coming forward in college football. So be sure to check that out with us here at SlasherU. We'll see you back here for next episode. Be sure to check out the podcast feed and the YouTube page, because not only will this podcast drop brand new today, also a brand new basketball preview. It's the big preview, we call it, with the Big 10 and the Big 12 will also be dropping today. College basketball is just right around the corner as well. So if you have enough bandwidth to stick with us for another hour. Check it out. We'll see you back here next time. Take care.